billions to the banks, but he does support a Big Three bailout. We welcome back to Happy Hour regular Republican from Michigan, Thaddeus McCotter. Congressman Cotter, first off, where is the vote stand at this point? I mean, is there going to be a vote tonight, and are you going to support it? You were for the bailout previously. What you've seen tonight, can you support that bill?
Well, first of all, there will be a vote tonight, but unfortunately, it's not going to be a bailout. It's going to be a bridge loan from an existing appropriation that was born of an unfunded mandate for the auto industry. It pales in comparison to the roughly $7.4 trillion that Congress so cavalierly airdropped on Manhattan as recently as October.
Congressman, thanks for coming on, sir, but I'm trying to do the math here. We're looking at $15 billion to three. I have a ton of issues with this. Number one, why Chrysler? Why is even Chrysler? I mean, they're a private company. You tell me why we're going to even include them in this. But number two, how is $15 billion going to help here when GM itself said they need $4 billion in the next couple of weeks and then another $4 billion in January? How are we splitting this up?
The immediate liquidity problem, especially with General Motors, is of the most dire concern. By its own admission, Chrysler believes that it has slightly more time before it starts to run into operational liquidity problems. Ford, of course, is not participating because their restructuring plan has been slightly ahead of the other ones, although they understand that if one goes under, the other three are going to be in dire danger and the entire supply chain could go under. So that's where we're at now. We hope to get them into March. The acceptance of a car czar, which is a horrible term, but one nonetheless we misuse, I suppose, is intended to oversee the restructuring, give taxpayer protection, and make sure that it is a sound investment in American manufacturing.
Congressman, you said March. What's going to happen in March? I mean, are they going to change their business model in 2.5? Is that 2.5 months?
This is what I love. They have been changing their business model all along for years. Perhaps we in the Midwest and in the manufacturing sector have gritted our teeth and suffered in silence rather than squealing out for a government assistance. All we wanted to be was left alone, and unfortunately people confuse that with being ignored. And this explains why problems in Washington and Wall Street recently have compounded to bring us to where we are today.
Congressman, you know, one of the things I'm loving that you're doing is you're wanting to go and get these crooks that are running the investment banks, from Thane to Vikram Pandit, you name it. You're going to get these guys to come testify in front. When are we going to see the perp walks for these CEOs of these investment banks that have taken on hundreds of billions of dollars of welfare already?
Well, I appreciate your comments. You've just shown that there's one person harder on them than me. I can't quite use that terminology.
But look, are you going to get them in front of you?
Absolutely. The House Republican leadership, at my urging, we've sent a letter signed by 83 of us to Chairman Frank of Financial Services Committee. He has said today he's going to bring in the CEOs. Again, if you compare what happened to the automakers, we respect the process. We know that they requested taxpayer money. They deserve to be in front of the Congress explaining themselves. But no CEO from Wall Street who has received any money has ever come in and done that too. So you are right. Chairman Frank is in accord with this, and we will start seeing them come in and explain why, as your earlier report said, the quote-unquote, no one has called this a Main Street bailout lately or a Main Street rescue lately, because it hasn't been.
Is there any chance at all that some of these guys actually face some criminal prosecution for lying to us, not necessarily shareholders, but lying to the public, lying to the regulators, or lying to their shareholders? Their balance sheets were nothing like they told us they were.
Well, there are law enforcement arms that do this within the executive branch, but I think the critical point is for Congress to try to understand why the rush to judgment on the Wall Street bailout led to very sloppy legislation. Sloppy legislation that when Mr. Kashkari was in front of us, and I admit I feel sorry for him. I mean, he serves under Mr. Paulson, so stuff rolls downhill. But the reality is, the way they wrote the legislation, AIG has a right to ask for money that every one of us thinks is insane. They can ask for Christmas bonuses after having to be bailed out by the taxpayers because of how badly the legislation was written. So this is part of the problem, and hopefully this type of hearing will lead us to go tighten up with the things that were done wrong and ensure that that money gets in the hands of people who are fighting off foreclosures or want to make a purchase.
Congressman, with Neil Kashkari there, he's overseeing the TARP. You know, he was in front of the committee all day today. Is this guy, are you going to sign off, you and your colleagues, on this guy for Treasury Secretary? Because he is already under enormous criticism for the job that he has done this far. I don't know if he's going to be able to even pass the muster of becoming Treasury Secretary.
Well, Mr. Kashkari is, again, fortunately, I'm not retired to the Senate yet. and nor do I intend to. So that will be their concern.
Yeah, but you have to raise concern. I mean, are you not concerned about his nomination? I'm not saying you're voting on it, obviously, but all of you, they're your colleagues.
I get concerned about a lot of things, but generally I concern most about the things I can control. I don't know that President Obama is going to be calling me and asking my input on the decision, and if he does, then we'll have a frank conversation. But in the end, it's going to go to the Senate.
Congressman, real quickly, let me get this straight. You were against any sort of TARP bailout. You're against any sort of spending on TARP, but you're in favor of an auto bailout. Is that right?
Yeah.
It's not a bailout if you look at the appropriation process and the mandates that were put on it and the Wall Street. If
But
you
you're
compare I oppose $7.4 trillion of taxpayers' new underwriting and appropriation for Wall Street on a plan that even TARP, that even Kashkari had to pull back from, which was appropriate. I use existing money to keep a manufacturing sector so the whole thing don't go under. Yeah, that's me.
Thank you much.
Thanks, Congressman,
Thank you.
so much. And yeah, give your
Bye-bye.
in point about Kashkari.